I've done a lot of seasonal work, fire watch, trail clearing, and winter maintenance. But I've only ever seen one man refuse to go into a warm cabin during a snowstorm, and I'll never forget what he said when I asked him why. This was back in 2019, before COVID, before the fires got really bad up north. I'd picked up a winter gig through a contract with the Michigan DNR, checking on state-owned structures up in the Upper Peninsula, mostly fire towers, remote sheds, and service cabins that don't get much use anymore. It was good money for quiet work, and I liked the isolation, still do. There were just 2 of us assigned to the route that week, me and this older guy named Rick. Long beard, oil-stained gloves, clearly one of those men who'd done this for decades, and didn't talk unless he needed to. That was fine by me. The DNR had a snowcat drop us off about 10 miles past the last plowed road, and we were supposed to snowshoe in to 3 remote sites over 5 days. First 2 cabins were uneventful, dusty, cold, and little signs of animal intrusion. We checked the propane tanks, wiring, marked some water damage, and moved on. But the 3rd site, that was different. We were about a quarter mile out when I saw the 2nd cabin, one that wasn't on my map. It was just beyond a tree break, tucked into a shallow ravine. Fresh snow had drifted down the slope behind it, making the roof look warped and heavy. I asked Rick if we were checking that one too. He didn't answer at first, just kept walking. Then finally he said, "No one uses that one." I let it go for the moment, but made a mental note to check it later. The wind was starting to pick up and we were both tired. The main cabin at the site was typical. Metal roof, wood stove, and cold as hell. We got the fire going and bunked down for the night. Around 2 a.m. I woke up freezing. Not just chilly, but in my bones cold. The fire had died. I put on my coat and went out to grab more wood. That's when I noticed it. There were prints in the snow, bare human footprints. They came from the tree line, wandered around the perimeter of our cabin, then trailed back toward the other one. No shoe tread, no boot compression, just clean, deep, barefoot prints in snow thick enough to freeze a toe solid in minutes. In the morning, I brought it up. Rick just shook his head. That's why we don't go near that place. I thought maybe it was a squatter or a survivalist, maybe even a prank. Later that afternoon, we ran into trouble. A pressure fitting on one of the water lines we were inspecting cracked, and we lost a good bit of our heated reserve tank trying to fix it. Not life-threatening, but enough to make it uncomfortable. The wind had picked up again and temps were falling hard. I told Rick we should head for the other cabin, just to warm up for a few hours. It was closer than our snowcat pickup, and if there was a squatter, we could figure that out once we got inside. That's when he said it. It don't stay warm in there. Fire won't catch. I just looked at him. What do you mean it won't catch? He wouldn't elaborate any further. Just said that he wasn't going in. Told me if I had to, I could, but he wasn't following. So I went, but I really shouldn't have. The cabin wasn't locked. Door hung loose on a rusted hinge. The inside looked surprisingly clean. There was no dust, no animal scat. Nothing that made sense for how long it had supposedly been abandoned. There were little things that started to feel off almost immediately. For one, the stove was cold, but there was ash in it. Fresh ash. Not old gray settled powder, but soft black flakes like someone had burned something recently. There was a pot on the counter, frozen stew inside. I chipped at it with a spoon. Potatoes, carrots, and what looked like venison. There was no smell. I tried to get the fire going, but Rick was right. It wouldn't catch. Even with kindling, even with fire starter, it would spark, flame up, and then smother in seconds. I thought maybe the chimney was blocked, but on inspection I noticed it wasn't. Then I heard movement upstairs. This wasn't a 2-story cabin. I stood there frozen, listening. A single creak, then another, then nothing. I stepped out onto the porch. Rick was still standing 50 yards away in the snow, arms crossed and watching. "I told you," he said when I came back out. "That place don't want you there." That night, we huddled in the main cabin with extra blankets and kept the fire going in shifts. Around midnight, the radio we brought, a shortwave hand crank, crackled to life. We hadn't touched it. The voice that came through wasn't English. It wasn't even speaking in full words, just broken syllables, like someone trying to imitate language. It repeated something that sounded like my name, only slightly wrong, off by a vowel. Then it laughed, low, raspy, and wet. Rick turned it off, didn't say anything, just shoved it into his pack like it had offended him. About an hour later, while I was on watch, I went outside to relieve myself. The sky was clear, moonlight hitting the snow like silver dust. And that's when I saw it, just for a moment. It was crouched halfway up the ravine, maybe 30 yards from the cabin I'd been in earlier. Gaunt, tall, arms bent the wrong way, legs too long for the trunk of the body. I thought it was a tree at first until it moved. Not toward me, but toward the cabin. It slipped around the side like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. I stood frozen for what felt like 10 minutes. When I finally went back inside, I didn't say a word. Neither did Rick. I think he knew. When the snowcat came for us the next morning, we didn't talk much on the ride out. I asked one of the drivers about the second cabin. He looked confused at first, then a little uncomfortable. "That one? Yeah, it's on the maps, sort of. Been there for a long time, but no one keeps it up. Every few years someone asks about it, and then they stop asking." That wraps up our first story. Sounds like it could have been a Wendigo. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And while you're here, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. And if you've got a true scary story of your own, the links to send them to are up on the screen. This'll be our only break, so let's get back to it. There's a noise your voice isn't supposed to make. I know because I heard mine do it, from 50 feet behind me in the dark. This happened in 2022 in northwestern New Mexico, near the Navajo reservation line, but technically not on it. I was working security for a small drilling contractor. We were doing soil tests for a private development, something about groundwater rights and mineral surveys. Boring stuff, but the money was decent, and the hours were quiet. I was the night guy, 12-hour shifts alone in a mobile trailer with a propane heater, a logbook, and a handheld radio in case one of the rigs went live after hours. They never did. Most nights I'd walk the perimeter twice between 10 and 2, then sit and wait for dawn. This was open scrubland, dry, cold at night, flat enough you could see the headlights coming from miles away. No houses, no traffic, just sand, juniper, and silence. The nearest town with a gas station was 30 minutes east. I liked it until I didn't. The first weird thing was the dog. It showed up on a Thursday night, middle of my shift, somewhere around 1:30 a.m. I was out doing my usual walk when I spotted movement near the edge of the floodlight perimeter. Just outside where the trailer's mounted lights faded into pitch black desert. At first I thought it was a coyote, small, wiry, but it wasn't moving right. Its legs were too long for the body, and its head was too still, like it was watching me, but not with the normal skittishness you get from a wild animal. Then it stood up, not all the way, just rose slightly on its back legs and held there, almost like it was testing something. I took one step backward and it dropped low again and skittered behind a rusted-out drum we'd left beside the trailer. I circled wide, kept my flashlight pointed forward. When I checked behind the drum, it was gone. No tracks, no sign of it. Next night it came back, same time, same spot. Except this time it didn't move. It just stared. I shouted at it and it didn't react. I threw a rock. It flinched but didn't run. I went inside and locked the trailer, even though I knew whatever it was probably didn't care. That night I called my supervisor, a guy named Carl, and asked if we had any security cameras installed. He said no, then, as a joke, asked if I was getting spooked by skinwalkers. I laughed, but it didn't feel funny. Night 3 is when it spoke. I was inside the trailer just after 2 a.m. Heater was on and radio was silent. I was half asleep in the chair when I heard something outside. Not a knock, not a bang, just this scraping shuffle, like someone dragging their feet in gravel. I stood up and turned off the heater so I could listen better. Then from right outside the door, I heard my own voice say, "Hey, I think we left the back gate open." I didn't move because I hadn't said that, and no one else was supposed to be there. Also, it was my voice. Not close to my voice, but exactly my voice. It was the same cadence, same rasp I get when I've had too much coffee. It even had the same little hitch I get on the word back. I stayed frozen in that trailer for over an hour. I didn't open the door. I didn't answer. Eventually, I heard it walk away slowly like it wanted me to hear it. The next morning, I found boot prints circling the trailer. They were definitely my boots, my tread pattern, even though I hadn't stepped outside. Night 4, I came armed. I brought my personal handgun and a heavy flashlight and sat awake the entire shift, staring out into the dark. It didn't come close this time, but I saw it, pacing just beyond the light. Its shape was wrong. The legs were too bent. The arms hung low and stiff, like something trying to remember how to be a human. And it was watching me. At 3:12 a.m., the radio crackled, just static at first. Then it said, "You left the back gate open." Same words, same voice, definitely mine. Then silence. I cut the shift short that night, told Carl one of the locks was jammed and I didn't feel safe. He offered to come out and take over. I told him not to, but he did come out anyways. That was a mistake. He called me around 6 a.m. the next morning. He sounded tired and agitated. Said he never saw anyone, but around 3:30 he heard someone talking behind the trailer. When he stepped outside, he saw a figure crouched at the edge of the site. Thought it was me playing some stupid prank. He said he called my name, and it stood up, looked at him, then walked off into the dark. He said it was like watching someone try to walk with bones in the wrong place. I quit my job 2 days later. I didn't give a notice, didn't even ask for my last paycheck, simply left. Carl texted me a week later to say the company had pulled out of the land, something about the client going dark and yanking their development plans. No explanation, and I haven't been back since. But sometimes when I walk alone at night, I swear I still hear my voice, calling from behind me, always just out of sight, always telling me I forgot something. I've only talked about this once, and I wish I hadn't. It was my uncle's land. That's how I usually start the story. Makes it easier to tell without sounding like I'm just trying to scare people. He had 40 acres up near Vermilion, real thick woods up there and not far from the Canadian border. place with no cell signal, no neighbors, no light pollution. Just trees, frost, and silence. He bought it after his second divorce and spent the better part of a decade building a cabin by hand. I think it gave him something to do that felt like progress. He wasn't exactly what you'd call social, more the kind of guy who talked to dogs easier than people. But I liked him. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was honest. I went up there in late November of 2021 to help winterize the place. His legs had been giving him trouble, and he needed help draining the lines, boarding the windows, and moving his solar gear into storage. He gave me a cot in the corner and said I could go hunting when I was up there, so I brought my rifle and a week's worth of food. We didn't have any issues for the first few days. The worst thing that happened was blowing a fuse trying to run the space heater and electric griddle at the same time. Then Wednesday came. We were sitting on the porch around dusk, watching the tree line like we always did, when he asked if I'd heard something the night before. I said no. He nodded and didn't push it any further. That was his way. But about 10 minutes later he got up, went inside, and when he came back, he locked the cabin door behind him, which was odd. I don't think I've ever seen him lock that door before, not even when we went into town. I asked him if something was going on. He said it was probably just a fox or a lynx, maybe something sick. But when he turned in for the night, I heard him get up and put something against the front door. A chair maybe, or one of the tool bins. I didn't say anything, I just listened. That night something walked around the cabin, not close at first. I figured it was a deer crunching through the crusted snow. But it didn't move like a deer. It paused, backtracked, took long, slow steps like it was thinking about each one. It circled us for almost 20 minutes. Then, just after 3 a.m., it tapped on the window. Not a hard knock, just a tap, like a finger. I didn't move. I don't even think I breathed. I waited for my uncle to say something, but he didn't. I thought maybe he'd slept through it. Then he whispered, "Don't answer it." That's when I realized he was awake the whole time. I barely slept after that. When morning came, we both pretended nothing happened, made coffee, talked about the pipes, and avoided eye contact. He was supposed to go into town that afternoon to pick up some copper fittings from the hardware store. It's about a 90-minute drive, and he asked if I wanted to come. I said no, figured I'd stay behind and work on the shutters, maybe go hunt the East Ridge. He didn't argue. I heard the truck crunch down the trail and disappear. Then it went quiet. I went about my chores for an hour or two, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Not from the trees, but closer, like the woods themselves were leaning in. Around 2 p.m., I was walking the perimeter behind the cabin, checking for rot along the foundation skirt, when I saw something in the trees. Only a flicker, like a figure stepping between trunks. At first, I thought it was my uncle. Maybe he'd come back early and parked the truck down the road for some reason. I called out, "Hey, you need a hand?" No response. I took a few steps toward the tree line. I didn't hear birds. I didn't hear wind. Just snow crunching beneath my own boots. Then I saw it again between two birches, too tall, too still. Its skin was the color of dry meat. It didn't have any fur or clothes that I could see. I didn't get a clear look at the face. I didn't want to. Something in my body locked up before I could step any closer. My throat felt dry and my hands were shaking like I'd just gotten out of cold water. I backed away slowly and went inside, locked the door. When my uncle came back, he didn't even get out of the truck, just sat there, staring. I went outside and walked up to the window. He said, "Pack your things, we're leaving." I didn't ask why, and he didn't explain. We drove an hour south and got a motel room. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor like he was trying to figure out how to say something without saying it. Finally, he just said, "That thing's been up there a long time." He told me a story about a cousin who disappeared up near Eli when they were kids. Said he thought he saw him once years later, walking along a trail, but he was barefoot in the snow and wearing the same jacket he'd gone missing in, except it looked too small on him this time. Said he was moving his landline from the main cabin to a satellite phone, but not because of coverage, just in case he needed to leave quickly. I never went back, and I don't tell people this story very often, not because I think they'll laugh, but because I don't want them going up there looking for it, thinking it's just a campfire tale or something you can film for a TikTok. Because here's the part that really sticks with me. When I packed my bag that day, I zipped it up tight and left it by the door while I went to grab the last of the food from the pantry. I wasn't gone more than 2 minutes. When I came back, the zipper was open, and inside, right on top of my clothes, was a small strip of torn fabric, the same plaid pattern my uncle had worn that morning. I used to walk at night, not for exercise or anything like that. It was more like a habit. Back when I lived in northern Wisconsin, I had the stretch of road behind my place, County Road M, that ran along an old creek bed in some undeveloped forest land. I'd walk it late, usually after 11. No cars, no lights, just moon and gravel and the smell of pine. I know that sounds dumb now. You couldn't pay me to walk a dark road alone anymore. But back then I liked it. It helped me think. I was going through a divorce at the time. My house felt too quiet and the woods felt more honest than people I knew. That's the headspace I was in when it happened. This was during the spring of 2018, one of those weird in-between nights where the snow had melted, but the air still felt like winter. I had my hood up and my hands in my coat pockets, just listening to the wind and my boots crunching gravel. About a half a mile down the road, there's this old steel bridge, one lane, barely wide enough for a pickup. The kind they stopped building in the 60s but never bothered to replace. I used to stop at the middle and lean over the rail to look at the water. That night I smelled something before I saw it. It was strong, rotten, like wet fur and meat that had been left in the sun. I figured maybe a deer had died under the bridge, or something got caught in the ice and thawed too fast. Then I heard breathing, not mine, something low and ragged, like lungs full of water. I looked to my right, toward the embankment. That's when I saw it. It was crouched just past the guardrail, maybe 20 feet away. At first I thought it was a bear, but it was too lean, too long. Its limbs didn't sit right. Its arms, not front legs, but arms, were hanging forward, bracing it upright. Its head was wrong too, not just shaped wrong, but facing the wrong way, like it had turned its neck more than anything should be able to do, and it was looking right at me. And its eyes, that's what I remember the most. Not glowing, not red, not monster movie stuff. They were just open too wide, too human, too focused. Like someone staring at you through a mask, waiting to see what you do. I didn't run, I didn't scream. I just stepped backward one slow step at a time until I was off the bridge. It didn't move, well, not at first. But when I was maybe 30 feet down the road, it shifted. Not like a step, more like a twitch. Like it had been holding perfectly still and something in it suddenly slipped. That broke me. I turned and ran. I don't remember getting back to my house. I remember locking the door, sitting in the dark and trying to convince myself it was just a sick animal. Maybe a dog. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. That was Thursday. On Sunday night, I heard scratching. Not loud, not clawing, just the soft sound of something brushing the siding of my house, like a branch tapping rhythmically. Only there were no trees near that wall. Then I heard something walk across my front porch. I could tell by the sound of the footsteps it was on two legs. Strangely, the motion sensor didn't trip. I sat in the hallway with a baseball bat until the sun came up. A few days later, I drove out to the bridge during the day. I wanted proof it was nothing. Maybe find a dead deer or a coyote den or tire tracks. But there was nothing. There were footprints in the mud just off the shoulder. Not boots, not paws, but something long, deep, like a human step, but wider at the toes and sunk too far for the weight of a man. They traveled off into the trees and I didn't follow. I told one person, my cousin Nick. He was always into weird stuff. Cryptids, missing 411, all of that. Figured if anyone would believe me, it'd be him. But when I told him, he didn't laugh. He didn't nod either. He just got quiet and said, "You ever hear of the Bray Road sightings?" I had, vaguely. Some local thing from years ago. I thought it was a werewolf hoax or something out of a tabloid. But he said, they never stopped. People just stopped talking. He told me not to go back, not to walk that road again, not alone and not at night. That was 6 years ago. I sold that house 2 months later, moved 3 hours south and told myself it was because of the job market. I've never seen it again, but here's the part I don't like admitting. Some nights, if I'm up late and the windows are open, I still hear that same breathing, low, wet, and close. And once I heard something brush across the front steps. My motion light didn't turn on, but the porch still creaked. There's something in the woods behind our shop. I don't say that lightly. I'm not one of those guys that hears a branch snap and thinks Bigfoot's out there flipping my trail cams. I've worked in forestry, land management, and wildlife recovery for 16 years. I've seen bears, wolves, and mountain lions. Even a moose stomped the front end of a side-by-side once. Animals don't scare me, but whatever this is, it's not an animal. Our crew does contract clearing for utility companies, brush management, fire break cuts, old cable recovery. It's dirty work, but steady. Last fall, we had a long-term contract out near Clatsop County in Oregon, real heavy woods near state forest land. We'd set up a mobile storage unit and tool shed behind an old maintenance station. The place had been vacant for years, maybe decades. It had one of those battered green bunkhouses left over from the 70s, and a busted chain link fence that stopped nobody. The thing I remember most is the trees. They were packed in tight, not like the nice spaced out rows you see in a managed forest land. These were chaotic, thick trunks, mossy, leaning in on each other like they were hiding something. That's where I first felt it. That watched feeling. Not just once or twice, but every time I stepped behind the storage unit. Like something ducked just out of sight. It wasn't until about the third week that I said something out loud. I was with Jason, another guy on our crew. Good worker, no nonsense. We were moving fuel cans around when I stopped and said, "You ever feel like something's just watching us out here?" He didn't laugh, just said, "Only when I'm alone." That stuck with me, because he didn't say if, he said when. A few nights later, I stayed late doing inventory. Everyone else had taken off. I was the last truck in the lot. Around 6:30, it started getting dark. I was inside the shed checking our PPE stock when I heard something shift behind the unit. Not footsteps, just the dry crack of bark, like someone pressing their hand into a tree trunk. I stepped outside but didn't see anything. Walked around the unit, flashlight on, and that's when it happened. I swear to you, every time I moved, something moved with me. Always out of sight, not far, just a split second after I did. I'd round a corner and hear something shift behind the opposite wall, double back and it'd shift again. always behind something. I thought maybe it was a prank. Maybe one of the guys had come back to mess with me. But when I finally shouted, "All right, funny, you can come out now," I got no reply, only silence, until I turned to head back inside, and I saw it, just for a second. It was pressed against the tree maybe 10 feet into the forest, long and thin, like a tall man hunched low, hugging the tree like a shadow. It didn't flinch and it didn't run. It just leaned there, completely still, like it had been a part of the tree the whole time. Then I blinked and it was gone. No sound, no motion, just simply vanished. I stood there frozen for what felt like minutes. Then I backed toward the truck, climbed in, and left the lights on high all the way down the road. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing that shape behind the tree. Long arms, pale skin stretched over bone, head too high for a human. Eyes I didn't even fully see, but somehow felt. I didn't tell anyone the next day. Thought maybe I'd just been too tired and imagined it. Then Jason didn't show up. He wasn't answering texts or calls. Our supervisor figured he was just sick or bailed. These are temp jobs. People disappear sometimes. But I drove out to his rental place that evening. His car was there, door locked, no lights. I left a note under his wiper and went home. He texted me around 2 a.m. The text simply said, "Saw it, followed me home, can't sleep." That was the last message I ever got from him. A few days later, we were clearing brush on the far side of the lot. I noticed something strange, tree trunks that looked polished in spots. Not from wind, not from wear. Like something had leaned against them for hours. Flattened bark, skin oil maybe, I don't know. But they were high up, like shoulder height on a man 7 feet tall. I showed another crew member. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, looked at the tree and walked away. That same day, our supervisor called in a new guy, Lucas. He was younger, tougher than me by a long shot. Didn't buy into anything he couldn't hold. I overheard him talking crap on the radio later. "Don't go into the woods, blah blah blah, this crew's scared of Bigfoot or some crap." That night, he decided to camp out at the lot to prove a point. Brought a sleeping bag, a cooler, and a GoPro. Next morning, he was gone. His gear was still there. Sleeping bag, cooler, everything untouched. Only thing missing was the GoPro. They called in search and rescue, searched the forest for days, but there was nothing, not even a footprint. They never did give an explanation to what happened. Eventually, the company shut down the site, said the contract had ended early. No other explanation. We were told to pack up and leave within 48 hours. I haven't gone back and I never got a call from Jason again. But here's the part I still think about. Right before we left, I went into the woods one last time, about 20 yards beyond the shed. I don't know why. Part of me needed to see it again, or prove to myself there was nothing there. What I found was a tree, perfectly clean on one side, like something had rubbed the moss and bark away by pressing against it for a long, long time. I worked maintenance at a water treatment plant just outside of Augusta, Illinois. Real small operation, mostly automated, so there's only 2 of us on night shifts. Me and a guy named Lonnie, good guy, retired Army. We do rounds together until midnight, then split up and take turns napping in the office. This happened last spring, still gets under my skin to think about. We had a fencing issue. Something kept triggering the motion sensors along the east perimeter, near the old lift station. First couple times we figured it was a deer, or maybe wind shaking loose brush. But it kept happening always in the same spot. We checked the line and there were no holes or sagging. Walked the interior twice and didn't find anything. Lonnie joked about raccoons learning how to pole vault. That night around 2:40 a.m., I was on a solo patrol. brought a coffee and figured I'd do one more lap just in case. When I reached the east side, the motion light flicked on before I got there. That gave me pause. It's one of those flood lamps that takes a few seconds to warm up, so it had been triggered just before I turned the corner. I slowed down and listened, but I didn't hear anything. The light was casting weird shadows through the fencing, long strips of chain link stretching across the gravel. For a second, I thought I saw someone crouched low on the other side of the fence near the brush. But then I realized the shape was inside the perimeter. I froze. It wasn't moving, not really, just crouched low, almost like a dog that didn't want to be seen. But it wasn't a dog. Its arms were too long, hands flat on the gravel. The longer I looked, the more I could make out. It wasn't wearing any clothes and it didn't have any fur. The skin looked a pale gray blue under the lamp. Its limbs were shaking, not like from cold, more like it didn't know how to be still. I wanted to call out, but my throat locked up. My flashlight was still on my belt. I didn't dare move to grab it. It slowly shifted like it had just noticed me. That's when I realized it didn't have visible eyes, just an empty space, a face without features or with features sunk too deep to catch the light. I backed away, not fast, but just enough to round the corner again. When I was clear of its line of sight, I bolted back to the main office. Lonnie was asleep and I didn't wake him. By the time morning came and we went back to check the fence again, there was nothing there. But right inside the gravel where I'd seen it crouched, the rocks had been pushed aside, like something dragged itself along the inside of the fence, low to the ground. There were smears too, maybe from hands or elbows. We filed a report, but nothing came of it. There was no footage, cameras didn't catch anything. But Lonnie started doing rounds with me again after that, and he never joked about the raccoons after dark.
You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radion production brought to you by Spoopy Cola.